Joaquin Guzman, also known as El Chapo, is one of the most infamous and dreaded cartel bosses. He formerly oversaw the Sinaloa cartel, and at his height, he was earning $3 billion annually. He was in charge of 50% of the total Mexican drug trafficking. He had several yachts, a fleet of Lear jets, a gun covered in diamonds, and a private zoo filled with tigers, crocodiles, and panthers. He was a violent criminal who rose in the cartel pyramid by murdering, maiming, and accepting bribes, but he wasn't only a good businessman. It therefore came as no surprise that a $5 million reward was placed on his head. El Chapo was twice detained and sentenced to prison, but he managed to escape. As a result, after his third detention in 2016, he was transferred to a maximum security prison in the United States, where no one has ever managed to escape. Let's investigate every aspect of El Chapo's Supermax jail and how the formerly menacing kingpin currently lives. El Chapo was already a well-known felon when he was captured in Guatemala in 1993. He had started out in the drug trade at an early age and advanced with the aid of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, also known as the Godfather in Spanish as El Petrino. He was the founder of all contemporary cartels and the notorious Guadalajara cartel's boss. The time that El Petrino was detained in 1989, El Chapo viewed this as a fantastic chance, and in 1993, he would establish his own cartel, the Sinaloa, and take over as the main figure in drug trafficking in Mexico. He was detained and given a 20-year prison term, but in 2001, after paying $2.5 million in bribes to prison guards, he escaped in a laundry cart. El Chapo spent 13 years on the lam before being apprehended once more in 2014. El Chapo was sentenced to a maximum security prison in Mexico, but thanks to bribery and a huge windfall, he was able to escape once more. El Chapo was unable to simply ride in sunset, so he employed a team to construct a tunnel beneath the shower in his prison cell. He had twice broken out of jail, and the DA was making a valiant effort to extradite him to the country so that he could be punished for his crimes there. El Chapo was therefore detained once more in 2016, but this time he was brought to the United States. El Chapo was visibly terrified from the moment he arrived at the American airport, which is likely a sign that he realized the situation was hopeless. He was convicted of several criminal offenses connected to his position as the Sinaloa kingpin in 2019. He was given a life sentence on July 19, 2019, in ADX Florence, Colorado, for ordering hit and runs, buying off officials, and supervising endless shipments. El Chapo entered his Colorado prison cell. He was now housed in the same facility as the Oklahoma City bomber and the Unabomber. These are extremely high-profile inmates who are seen as being exceptionally dangerous and prone to fleeing, and the jail treats them accordingly. El Chapo and his fellow prisoners are locked in a soundproof cell for 23 hours each day. In addition to being closely watched by numerous guards during rack time, inmates are also cuffed, shackled, and have chains around their torsos during their 1 hour of free time. They are unable to move quickly, leap, or run. Of course, phones are also off limits. In fact, the only technology available to inmates is a small, black and white TV in their cell, and they can only get this TV if they have a history of behaving well. El Chapo is permitted to watch TV if he so chooses, although the inmate selection process prevents streaming or HD TV. If this sounds excessive, it's only because ADX Florence was created specifically for inmates who are likely to attempt a dangerous escape. The most secure jail in the country is ADX Florence, but it has only been operational for a short while. On November 30, 1994, it opened its gates. In response to many occurrences and conditions at other American prisons in the 1980s, the Florence Supermax was constructed. For instance, security guards at the Marion Federal Prison were stabbed to death. Consequently, ADX Florence set out to make the facility impassable, with more guards than inmates and a strict timetable that prevents them from wreaking as much havoc. It is referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies for this reason. Only 375 prisoners are housed at ADX, which is a paltry number when you consider the effort that goes into security. El Chapo won't be breaking out of prison anytime soon because of the surrounding gun towers, numerous rows of razor wire fences, and numerous guards stationed at every turn. People are talking about more than just ADX Florence's security system, though. The subject of heated debate is jail life. I don't know what hell is, but I do know that you know. The assumption would be that for a free person, would be pretty close to it. The warden stated in reference to the prison. The prisoners first endured 23 hours of solitary confinement. The United Nations considers this to be torture, which is worse than disobeying fundamental human rights. According to reports, about a third of the prisoners in the Florence Supermax are thought to have serious mental diseases. But after spending days in solitary confinement, the other two-thirds may also develop new mental health problems. In a 2012 lawsuit, it was claimed that the Axis social skills and adaptability had been severely damaged by years of seclusion and little to no human contact. ADX Florence inmates' lone window is 4 inches wide, and when they look out, all they can see is the sky. No prisoner would ever be aware of their cell's location. Inmates at the ADX Florence facility have been reported to hurt themselves or scream for hours as they simply lose control in their cramped cells. Others have been reported to mutilate their bodies with razors, glass shards, sharpened chicken bones, writing implements, and other objects they can get their hands on. Is it possible that an inmate who bit off both of his pinky fingers during a psychotic episode would have done the same thing in the outside world? This is a very unsettling event. Or in another jail, or in complete seclusion, the Florence Supermax caused this awful situation. Inmates have occasionally committed quite horrible suicides as too. Many ingest sharp objects including razor blades, nail clippers, radio and television pots, pieces of broken glass, and other potentially harmful items. The 1993 World Trade Center bomber, Ramzi Youssef, is one of several extremely dangerous individuals that call Max home. Before being apprehended and transported to the Florence Supermax, the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski tormented the U.S. with bombs for 20 years, along with other infamous bombers like the Oklahoma City bomber and the Boston Marathon bomber. However, not all of the convicts at ADX Florence are the worst of the worst. Every prisoner has a 7 by 12-foot cell where they sleep and spend the majority of the day alone. The shower has a timer to prevent flooding, and the toilet, basin, and mirror are all contained in a steel unit. But because the shower only comes on automatically 3 times a week, the convicts cannot take a shower anytime they choose. Prisoners won't even be able to sleep for very long because their bed is little more than a small mattress and a blanket on top of a concrete slab. At the Florence Supermax, convenience isn't exactly a priority. All of the furniture is constructed of concrete, and the toilet unit is attached to the floor to stop prisoners from turning them into homemade weapons. Mealtimes are difficult for the convicts who receive them. There is a library where prisoners can obtain books and periodicals to read for themselves. There is also a call allowance of 15 minutes per month for telephone calls. Even though the calls are recorded and have a time limit, convicts in other institutions are allowed to speak with their families every day. The ADX does, however, permit visits up to 5 times a month, but each of these must be justified, and convicts are once more closely watched. In most prisons, solitary confinement is employed as a punishment for a few hours or a day. But in Florence Supermax, it is the standard practice for prisoners who attack others or break prison rules. Even just going through its hallways gives off an ominous vibe. For the first 3 years in the ADX, inmates are not permitted to interact with other inmates, and they must spend their hour-long rack time alone in a chamber with a pull-up bar or a caged pen in the yard. After 3 years with a clean record, they are allowed to spend their hour of free time conversing with other prisoners. An inmate gets 4 more hours per day during their final year in prison and is allowed to eat with other prisoners. El Chapo, however, will be spending the remainder of his life in the Florence Supermax, making all of this impossible. El Chapo has been residing in the ADX Florence for 3 years as of 2022. Emma, his wife, has put up a valiant struggle to get him more humane treatment. Other than the minute he spent speaking to the prison guard, El Chapo still has no human contact. He is kept at distance 13. The most dangerous inmate is housed in the ADX block. He is only given access to a hose to wash himself because he once constructed a tunnel under his shower to escape from prison. El Chapo has appealed his conviction, and according to his attorney, The deprivation of sunlight and fresh air over an extensive 27-month period is causing psychological scar. He is suffering many symptoms of distress as a result of this lengthy and warranted punishment. Whether or not you think El Chapo's sentence was unfair is up to you to decide. El Chapo did kill numerous individuals in order to increase his power and wealth inside his cartel. But what should his punishment consist of? Should even the worst offenders be housed in squalor? El Chapo's lawyers claim that because the lights and the noisy air conditioning are continually on, he can hardly get any sleep. Additionally, he bemoaned how the guards' frequent conversation in the hallway made it nearly impossible for him to get any rest. Emma even expressed concern for El Chapo's safety at the Florence Supermax, saying that his blood pressure has been dangerously elevated lately. El Chapo couldn't see his family or attorneys for a long period following the COVID-19 pandemic, since visits were also halted. It is yet unknown how much interaction El Chapo has with the outside world. But it is obvious that he is making a valiant effort to flee the oppressive circumstances in ADX Florence. He cannot break out of jail this time, though, unless the appeal is successful. He will live out the remainder of his days in the most secure jail in the country. Does El Chapo merit the treatment he is receiving now? This is the type of fate that a man responsible for horrible cruelty and murder deserves, said DEA Special Agent Ray Donovan. He doesn't leave his cell because the Sinaloa cartel was responsible for thousands of deaths or execution orders. The difference is that because he is still alive, he is able to do a lot of things, unlike many of his victims, which makes it less monotonous, boring, and depressing. Do you agree with Ray Donovan? Should El Chapo or any prisoner really get more humane treatment, no matter the gravity of their actions? Let me know down in the comment section, and before you go, make sure you hit those like and subscribe button. You don't ever want to miss a new episode. See you all next time.